In this lesson, we're going to see how to set out and draw kitchens and bedrooms. Now, these are typically the areas where you want to have quite strict considerations to how you size and space different objects in these rooms. For example, you want to make sure that you have enough space around the bed to be able to walk around. You want to make sure that your cupboard widths are the right size. And the same thing in the kitchen. You want to make sure that your table, your serving counter, the spaces in between cupboards are all suitable to be used in the application that you're using them in. So for example, if it's a house, you want to make sure that it's a comfortable residential scale. Remember as well, earlier on in the course, I referred you to NewFit. This is the Architect's Bible of dimensions and standards. So that's always something that I like to look across to, just to remind me if I'm ever confused about any dimension or detail. So in our particular case on our design here, we can go and turn on the image underlay, and it's a good idea to then use that as a guide so that you can just block out the counters or the locations or the furniture layout that you want to do before you then turn off this underlay and carry on sizing the space out. So the first thing I'm going to do, make sure that you're in the right layer, is I'm going to draw rectangles that are going to be the correct width of the counter. Then I'm going to size everything up according to the existing plan. So start with a rectangle, so REC, enter, and I'm going to just type in any arbitrary dimension. So let's say 1.5 meters for the width, and then the dimension vertically, I'm going to type in 600. So I'm going to just quickly redo this a little bit faster so that I have that done correct. I'm going to delete this one, it was incorrectly made. And this is now a counter width, and I can go and check that size by DI just in case you don't want to make sure, basically you want to make sure that before you start copying or editing it that you didn't make any mistake in your creation. So make sure that that width is right. And then you can start moving it across in plan. You can take this edge if you select it, and you can basically stretch it out so that it is lining up with what you want. And then between the counter and the back working area, you want to have around 1.1 to 1.2 meters. So let's create a construction line, and we're going to offset that by 1.2 meters. And now we know where to create that second counter. Now the second counter can be slightly wider, since what we want to have is a very large working surface that we can have chairs on the other side of. And basically it can become like a breakfast corner where people can also use it as a bar at night, and basically a multifunctional big table. So what we want to do here is you can either copy the rectangle that you have over here, or let's just go ahead and create a brand new one. So the dimension this time will be that arbitrary distance, 1.5, and then we can make this one 1.1 meters in terms of width in that dimension. So let's go and move this so that it lines up with this counter first of all. We can then change that if we need to, and I'm going to put it roughly out to there. Also remember that you want to move it onto that line that you spaced out, so that that dimension is the same. So here you will see that when you start drawing your furniture, you'll see that it starts overlapping your walls. So one thing that you can do at this point is you can go and use the draw order function, so DR enter, and you can just select the walls and make sure that they are above objects. So you can either click on that, make sure that you then click on those objects, or you can also, if you just want to put it on top of absolutely everything, then you can type DR enter and then just go front, and basically it'll push that wall right up to the front and anything else will be behind it. So this was just easier for you to see in case that gray line is covering up the green line. So I can also adjust the text, and basically this is how I start then working on my kitchen area. The other thing that you can now do is you can add your chairs, your bar chairs that basically move, or at least are spread around this kitchen table. And as well, I can also decide whether I do want to actually stretch this entire space, because it would be quite nice to have that kitchen table being a little bit further back. So you can then also tweak things by grabbing both those tables, moving the entire arrangement together, and then sizing this a little bit smaller. For example, to here, having that column go right through the table, if you would like that as a design feature. and you could now move these walls up to this counter, or actually have this as a in-between counter and then do something behind it as well. So all of these things you can now start spacing out. But the main thing that I wanted to show you in this part of the lesson was that you want to get this counter width correct, and you want to get this spacing correct, and then you can do anything you want in terms of this dimension. So you can go and make that smaller and bigger, add walls, and do whatever you want. But make sure that you don't change those crucial dimensions. But pretty much the same thing happens in the bedrooms. What we want to do here, if I just quickly turn on the image underlay, is we're going to have a cupboard that is lining that entire back wall. Then we're going to have a gap, and we're going to have a wall that is going to go partially up to about 1.2 meters, and then we're going to have the bed centered in the middle of the room in front of that wall. So I can now turn this underlay off, and I can start working on that arrangement. So instead of redrawing the rectangle, I'm going to go and copy this kitchen counter, and I'm going to rotate it, since I know that a cupboard and a kitchen counter are quite similar. In some cases, some people like to make their cupboards 700 so that they factor in any thickness for door handles or wider cupboards and so forth. So let's just use a more generous size, and at least you will know that you won't actually run out of space. So sometimes it is nicer to work with bigger sizes in case you run out of space later on. So the same process here. I'm going to leave a 1.2 meter gap. That's going to be the area that I'm going to be getting dressed in, and then I'm going to have a 100 millimeter wall that I can also now create a rectangle in front of. Then what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have enough circulation space around your bed. Also, a good idea is to find a center point, so I can just draw a line between those walls, and I'm going to draw a construction line running down that center. If you want, you can also relayer it so it looks like a construction line, and you can basically center everything on that. Now I want to leave at least, well, the minimum would be 900, but I want to see if I can get away with having 1 meter of circulation space around that entire room. So I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I'm going to then offset that by 1 meter. And I'm going to see if I can get my bed to squeeze into that gap. So I'm going to now move this bed into the center, grabbing that center point, snapping it onto that intersection between this center line and the wall. And basically I know now that if I stretch this wall to these lines, that I will have a comfortable amount of space to walk around the bed. Now, one of the things that you want to have in most bedrooms is you want to have sufficient space for your bedside table. So here, because of space, what you can do, since you're designing this from scratch, you can either make narrow bedside tables, you can either stretch this across. What you could also do is you could leave 900 millimeters here and leave a slightly wider gap here, since most of your circulation will be around the bed. So if you're not that crucial, or if you're not that strict about having perfect symmetry, you could go and move that across, and it'll allow you to have a little bit more space. So think about all of these things when you're designing your bedrooms. It is nice to have slightly more space so that you have your bedside table. Some people would go the extent of turning the bed against the wall and basically walking in and looking at the bedroom this way. What I do like about this arrangement is that in our case we have fantastic views out in this direction, and it is a very beautiful layout to have in a bedroom, that you can have a centralized bed with a back wall for a feeling of coziness, and having the view as you wake up and sit in bed looking out the window. So that's much better than looking at a wall and looking at a door. So think about all these things when you're designing your bedrooms. They're all very important considerations to make, and they do definitely change the experience of these type of rooms. One more thing that you can think about of the bedroom just before I finish the lesson is that it is nice to have a seating area in a bedroom. So the one option is that you can add a small couch in front of the bed. So you can, for example, look at having just a little footstool, or otherwise put a low sofa that you don't block your view with. But you can basically start looking at what that would look like if you put a smaller type of seating area just in front of the bed. You could have a tiny coffee table on the side, or basically something that you can sit and have breakfast or anything like that in. The other thing you can do is to have separate chairs that are sitting on the side of your bedroom. So for example, you could have a single chair like so, and you could have a tiny coffee table or a little side table next to that. So all of these things as well are possible. Think about those and you will end up having great layouts if you just focus on those main offsets and circulation space that you have around your objects.